In this video, I'm going to try to work every single question of the final exam review for pre-college algebra. Hopefully this does you well. What I would recommend is every time we get to a problem, I would pause the video, try and do it yourself. And then if you get hung up, you can come back and watch how I do it. All right, starting with question 1. If the question says evaluate, that means we're just going to sub in our value for x. So evaluate, we're just going to get a number, okay? Evaluate, if the question says evaluate or solve, our answer is going to be just be a number. If our question says simplify, then we're still going to have x's or y's or w's. There's still going to be a variable with the answer. Since this one says evaluate, we should have a number answer. The way you evaluate is we're just going to sub in x equals 3. So 3 squared plus 5 times 3 plus 6. Remember, it's very important when you sub it in to put it in parentheses. When you evaluate, you're subbing it in with parentheses. Otherwise, you might get the wrong answer. I'm going to type this in the calculator. And when I do, I get 30. That's my answer for question number 1. Question 2 says simplify. That means we're probably still going to have a w with our answer. Anytime you see a parentheses, you should be thinking that you're going to distribute into that parentheses. When you distribute here, you get negative w minus 2 plus 2w. And then the last step for anything is simplify is you're going to look for like terms. So here I have a negative w and a positive 2w. That equals a total of w minus 2. You could have also written that as negative 2 plus w. Question 3, pause the video and try it for yourself. I'm going to uncover the answer in 3, 2, 1. So this is how I did it. Again, parentheses, I distributed first, then combined the like terms, the 5 and the 12, add to 17. Either of these answers is fine. Doesn't matter what order those come in. Question 4, solve the equation. For equations, you want to do all your adding and subtracting first, all your multiplying and dividing last. If it says solve, we're looking for an answer, a single number answer for Q. So the first thing I would do here is add the 8 to both sides, and I would get negative 5Q equals negative 13 plus 8 is negative 5. Then I would divide by negative 5 on both sides. We want to get Q by itself. And I get Q equals positive 1. 1 is my answer. As always with any of these questions, if you can find me making a mistake, if you just email me and let me know, hey, you made a mistake on question 4, then I'll give you your bonus points. Question 5, it says solve. We want a single number answer. I'm going to give you 3 seconds to go ahead and try and solve this. You can pause the video if you need to. Here's how I solved it. I added 1 to both sides, then divided by 6 on both sides to get m equals negative 4. The next couple of questions, we're doing the same exact thing. It says solve, so we're trying to get an answer. We're trying to get a number answer. Just as maybe going to have more than just 2 steps. The last 2 have only had a couple steps. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then we're done. Here we might have a little extra. In this first one, I noticed that we can combine those 2 together to make negative 12x. Minus 16 equals negative 52. Add the 16 to both sides, and we get negative 12x equals, I think that's negative 36. We can divide by negative 12 on both sides, and get x equals 3. For any of these that we were asked to solve, if we want to check our answer, we could sub a 3 in for every x, right? Whatever we got for the answer, we could sub in for every x and make sure that on the left side it gave us negative 52 equals negative 52. Question 7, solve for u. Same thing, we just want to do all the adding and subtracting first, then the multiplying and dividing. Take 3 seconds, see if you could solve it. And now I'm going to show you how I solved it. I started by adding 7u to both sides. You could have added 2u. You could have subtracted 2, as long as at the end you got u equals 3. Question 8, same type of question. I see parentheses. The first thing I want to do is distribute. So negative 12 equals negative 2w plus 7w plus 28. That 7 has to go to both items there. I have like terms here. Negative 12 equals 5w plus 28. Every time you make a step, you should have 1 fewer things, right? So here I had 4 items. Now I have 3 items. Let's see if we can make it 2 items fewer. Subtract 28 from both sides. Typically, if I just added something, so here, those just made a 5w, I'm probably not going to move that 5w. Subtracting 28 gives me negative 30 equals 5w. Divide by 5 on both sides, and I get negative 6 equals w. That's my answer. Again, if I wanted to check this, I could go back to the original problem and sub in a negative 6 everywhere there's w. All right, solve the equation. I didn't hide this one, I'm sorry. Solve the equation. So I solved it all out. I distributed the 4. This works the same way as the last one. Subtracted the 4y, subtracted the 3. I got y equals negative 19. If you ever get just a number answer, you'll have one of these where you have to classify it. A number answer, that's a conditional equation. Conditional equation. If you just get one answer, x equals so-and-so, y equals so-and-so, that's conditional. I have 2 extra examples here to show you the other 2 options. If I was to solve this one on the left, distribute the 5, 5y plus 15 equals 5y plus 10, subtract the 5y on both sides, and I get 15 equals 10. If I ever get something that's just not true, that is a contradiction. On the right side here, if I distribute, I get 5y plus 15 equals 5y plus 15. I can subtract 5y from both sides and get 15 equals 15. You can do as much work as you want, subtract 15 from both sides, whatever, you get 0 equals 0. That's just a true statement, right? And so that is an identity. If you ever get something that's true, it's an identity. Something that's false is a contradiction. And just a regular number answer, that is a conditional equation. Okay, that's the 3 options there. Any fraction equation. So question 10, if we have fractions, the thing that we're going to do is try and get rid of the fractions first. We don't like to deal with fractions, so we'll multiply by every denominator, 4, 3, and 2. 4, 3, and 2. 4, 3, and 2. I'm doing that to every single fraction, and the things that match up top to bottom will eliminate. So what's left is 3 times 5 times 2 times w. All those things would be 30w. I'm going to keep the minus sign. You see that minus sign? Keep it. 2 times 4 times 2 is 16. Keep the equal sign. Keep the negative sign. So equals negative. All this stuff that's already here is going to stay with your problem. 4 times 3 is negative 36. I can add 16 to both sides. Notice after the first step, I don't have any fractions left. And then I can divide by 30, and I get w equals negative 2 over 3. Let's make that look a little more like a 3. All right, same thing here. Take a second and see if you can solve this one. I've got 2 here for you. I would just pause the video and see if you could solve both. On the first one, you could multiply by 3 and 7. Or you could do what I did and just multiply by 3 and 7, right? If you multiply by 3, 3, and 7, you should still get the same answer in the end. On the bottom one, I'm multiplying by 3 and 4, and that means multiplying that negative 2 by 3 and 4 as well. And I got v equals negative 24 as my answer. All right, the next 2 problems are word problems. What we're going to do every time we have a word problem, we're going to try and set it up with a little box chart like this. So we have 2 different things here. We have Maria, we have Orlando. That's our 2 different things, Maria and Orlando. It says Maria has 16 fewer apps than Orlando. So if Orlando has X, then Maria has X minus 16. And it says the total amount of apps is 34. So Maria's plus Orlando's equals 34. Maria's is X minus 16. Orlando's is X. And they add to 34. So if I combine like terms here, 2x minus 16 equals 34. Add the 16. 2x equals 50. Divide by 2. X equals 25. And then I'm going to look back to my chart and see where that goes. So up here, if x is 25, that's this column of the chart. And this side is x minus 16, so 25 minus 16 is 9. And we can again look at the chart to see how many does Maria have. Maria has 9. How many does Orlando have? Orlando has 25. And we can sort of just do a mental sanity check here. The total of their apps is 34. 25 and 9 does make 34. Okay, so we think we're onto something here. Try this one. Same way. Set it up. This is what my setup looked like. When I tried to solve, it says the perimeter, right? For perimeter, we have to add up all 4 sides. So that would be, if I put all four sides, I'd have an x minus 3 side, an x minus 3 side, an x, and an x. Add up all four of those, and you should add up to a total of 14. So this was my setup. I solved and got 5 equals x. Again, I can look back to my chart to see where that goes. 5 is x. So then here, 5 minus 3 is 2. The length, looking back to my chart, the length is 5. The width is 2. All right, question 15, solve for x. If it tells you solve for x, that's the variable we want to get by itself. I'm not going to move that variable. I'm going to leave the x alone and move everything else. Here's the x. I'm not going to move it. I'm not going to go add 3x or anything like that. I'm leaving the x where it is. First thing I want to do is all my add and subtracting, so add y. Y and 11 will not combine. So negative 3x equals 11 plus y. Then to get x by itself, I can divide by negative 3. So then x equals 11 plus y over 3. And you can leave your answer just like that. I'm not going to count you off if you put it just like that. If you try it in Alex and it doesn't want it like that, I think it will let you put it in like that, but it might want it as 11 over 3 plus y over 3. Either of those is fine. Once you get x by itself, you've done the problem. Solve for x. Once you get x by itself, that can be your last step. Do the same thing here. Try and solve for y. So you can subtract 6x from both sides. 4 minus 6x, divide by negative 3 on both sides. And again, as soon as you get y by itself, this is a fine and dandy answer. You could put that into MyLab. If MyLab doesn't count it correct, or Alex doesn't count it correct, you're just going to separate it into two fractions, right? And then on this right side, this fraction will actually simplify. Negative 6 over negative 3 is the same as positive 2. So this is the answer that Alex actually wants. Again, if you put this on your test, I would count that as correct. You've solved for y at that point. That's what it asked you to do. Question 17. We're almost a third of the way done now. Graph the inequality on the number line. Remember this arrow, as long as your variable's on the left, that arrow is going to point which way you shade. If you have just a less than or just a greater than, that's going to coincide with an open circle. If you have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, that's going to coincide with a closed circle. So here, this a is just less than 5. That's going to be an open circle on that 5, negative 5. And since the arrow points to the left, we're going to shade to the left. If the variable had been on this side, we would have shaded the opposite way. So if I had negative 5a, I want to shade to the left, but since my variable's on the right side, I'm actually going to shade the opposite way. Let's not worry about that, though. That's very likely not going to happen. If it does happen, you can just flip the whole thing around, right? So really, with inequalities, with equations, it doesn't matter. Notice on some of these, we got 5 equals x. We don't really care. We're just going to leave the x on the right side. With inequalities, though, with less than, greater than, things like that, it makes it easier to think about if your variable's on the left. So here, if I'm thinking about how to write this, I know it's just going to be, since that's an open circle, it's going to be one of these two symbols, right? Just the less than or just the greater than. Since it's shaded to the right, I'm going to put the arrow to the right, right? It's almost like it's pointing to the right. X is greater than, and it's greater than this number right here, 1. That's your answer. Solve the inequality for u. As soon as you get the u by itself, you're done here, okay? So let's do all our adding and subtracting first. I'm going to add 5u. You could have subtracted 2u. 7u plus 6 equals 62. Subtract the 6. 7u equals 56. Divide by the 7. And I realize here that I have lost my inequality sign. Please don't do that. So here I have a less than or equal to. Less than or equal to. The only time you have to flip that inequality sign is if you divide or multiply by a negative. Here I divided by a positive 7. I'm not going to flip my inequality sign. That is what it's like. And so if I needed to graph that, I would have an 8 on my number line, a closed circle because it's less than or equal to, and I would shade left because this arrow looks like it's pointing to the left. All right, graph the line. Anytime you have a y equals the line, that's going to be vertical because it has to hit the y-axis. I'm sorry, I have this backwards. Anytime you have a y equals line, it has to be a horizontal line because it has to hit the y-axis. So where y equals negative 3 is right here, your line's going to go straight through like that. just like that. If I had an x equals line, let me change colors here. Let's say I had x equals 5. That's going to be a vertical line because it has to hit the x-axis at 5. The equation is given, find the intercepts. Okay, so anytime you want to find either intercept, you're going to sub in a 0 for the opposite item. So for the x-intercept, I'm going to sub in a 0 for y. That's 4x minus 0 equals 8. 4x equals 8. 0 doesn't affect it at all. Divide by the 4. X equals 2. I'm going to go and put that on my line down here. All right, the y-intercept, I'm going to sub a 0 in for x. That's 4 times 0 minus y equals 8. 4 times 0 is nothing, so negative y equals 8. Divide by the negative 1, and y equals negative 8. So y equals negative 8, that is down here, and then my line just has to go through those 2 points. I believe for these it says, oh, it doesn't say, but I believe you only have to put in an integer answer. So for the x-intercept, we're just going to put a 2. For the y-intercept, we're going to put a negative 8. Find the x and y intercepts in graph. Okay, so you try to find the x and y intercepts. I'm going to show you what they are in 3, 2, 1. X equals 8 over 3, y equals 2. If we want to graph that line, I'm just going to type this in the calculator, 8 over 3, and see what about it is. It's 2.666, ... right? Just to give me an idea of where to put it on the graph. And again, this is what the graph looks like, 2.666, and y equals 2. If you wanted to color code that, this right here would be my blue point right there. Anytime it asks you for slope, if it says find the slope and it has 2 points, you're going to use this formula right here. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'll give you that formula on the test. So here I'm going to label these points as x, y, x, y, right? X, y, x, y. Each point's at x, y. This is going to be my point 1. That's going to be my point 2. When I go to sub these in, I'll have negative 1 minus negative 4. Notice the minus is built into the formula over negative 8 minus 6. You can type that directly in the calculator. I would say, let's go and put this in parentheses like that, okay, for the formula. And that way, when you type it in your calculator, you'll type it in with parentheses as well. And that's going to give me 3 over negative 14. I hope I did that right. Let me type in my calculator. Negative 1 minus negative 4. Negative 8 minus 6. Okay, I think I've got the right thing here. All right, do the same thing on the next one. This is what I got. I solved and got negative 4 minus negative 4 over 5 minus 4. If you type the whole thing in your calculator, you'll just get 0 out as the answer, and that's fine. The slope is 0. If you had typed it in, what if we had 4, negative 4, and 4, 7. And then we typed in the calculator, right? This is my xy, that's my xy. Then I would have 7 minus negative 4 over 4 minus 4. And then when you type in the calculator, it would give you error. It would give you a domain error, I believe, or a divide by 0 error. Divide by 0 error. And in that case, the answer is undefined. The only time the answer is undefined is if it gives you an answer. I'm sorry, the only time it's undefined is if it gives you an error in your calculator, okay? And that's just going to be like when you type in the box, you'll have some options over here. One of the options will be undefined, and you'll just click that button. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. I'll give you slope-intercept form on your test as well. It's y equals mx plus b. Notice the y is by itself. For slope-intercept form, the y is by itself. So here if I add 6x to both sides, I'll get y equals 9 plus 6x. I really want it to be mx plus b. So instead of writing it as 9 plus 6x, I'm just going to write it as 6x plus 9. That's mx plus b. That is my slope-intercept form. That's going to go in this box. And then to graph it, the way that you do this is you start at b. You start here. So I'm going to start at 9. And then from there you go your slope. Slope is 6, same thing as 6 over 1. That's our rise over run. So I need to rise 6, run 1. Rise 6, run 1. If you can, you want to run to the right. And you could do, again, a sanity check here. That's a positive 6. If I was to put a car on this, it would be going uphill, right? Positive slope. Positive 6 slope, it's going uphill. Graph the line, y equals mx plus b. I've labeled the m and the b. We're going to start here. And we know that that's a y-intercept. B is the y-intercept. It's not the x-intercept, so don't start back here. Don't start on the left. You're starting by going up and down. So we're going to go down 8. That's where we start. And then the m is 1, so I'm going to go up 1 over 1. M equals 1 over 1. That's our rise over run. Same thing, I've got it labeled, y equals mx plus b. B is negative 2. The m is negative 3 over 2. M is negative 3 over 2. That's our rise over run. So I need to rise negative 3 and run 2. So that's down 3 over 2. Again, a sanity check. If we put a car on here, it'd be going downhill, right? A negative slope. It's going downhill. We want mx plus b here. To find a slope, remember slope is m. So if we get it to be y equals mx plus b, we'll know what m is. This is what it looks like when we solve it for y, right? Y equals mx plus b. This is what it looks like. So then the slope is negative 1 over 4. For any parallel line, it's going to be the exact same thing. For any perpendicular line, it's going to be the opposite reciprocal. So we flip the fraction, 4 over 1, same thing as 4. And instead of negative, we're going to make it a positive. If it was a positive, we'll make it a negative. If it was a negative, we'll make it a positive. All right, question 29, simplify. We've got parentheses. Again, anytime we have parentheses, we want to get rid of those first. We need to distribute this power, and the power needs to go to everything. If you do 2 to the 5 in your calculator, not 2 times 5, but 2 to the 5 is 32. And exponents to exponents, you multiply those. So v to the 10, w to the 15. Notice that 5 applied to everything somehow. It applied to everything somehow. We did 2 to the power of 5 because it's 2 to the 5. V to the 2 to the 5, that's a power to a power. You multiply the powers. W to the 3rd to the 5, power to a power, multiply the powers. Same thing here. I'm sorry I didn't cover up your answer here. If you want, you can ignore the right and try and solve it on the left. All right, question 31. We're halfway there. Simplify. With a plus in between, all we're going to do is combine like terms. A plus. All we're going to do is combine like terms. If we distributed a plus to both of those, it's not going to change anything. So I can just rewrite this as plus 6v plus negative 6v. So I'm going to write it as minus 6v plus 4. We can combine the negative 6v and the negative 2v into negative 8v. We can combine the negative 3 and the positive 4 into a positive 1. Remember, if it says simplify, we said this at the beginning, if it says simplify, you're still going to have x's, y's, v's, w's, all that stuff in your answer. Multiply. All right, if it's multiplying, notice this one up here, we just combine like terms because it had a plus. This one says multiply. That means we need to FOIL or distribute. So I'm going to make every combination I can here. First, x times 6x would be 6x squared. X times 7 would be 7x. 5 times 6x would be 30x. 5 times 7 would be 35. And then if it says simplify, multiply, whatever, combine like terms if you can. 6x squared plus 37x plus 35. That's our answer. Try the next one. I'm going to show you the answer in 3, 2, 1. Notice on this one, we multiplied, made every combination we could, then those middle two terms, the positive 28 and negative 28, those combine to make 0. Same thing on the next one, 34, multiply. This is what I get, combine your like terms, and then I went on and put it in descending order where the highest exponent was first. Question 35 says factor. I have a factoring chart that I'm going to give you on your test. You should go back and look at that factoring chart. If you don't have it in front of you, go on and grab it now. The first thing you want to do always is GCF, and this one does have a GCF, 5 and a Y. If you take a 5 and a Y out, we know we're going to have two items because of that plus. If I took a 5Y out of the first item, I would just have a 2. If I took a 5Y out of the second item, I would have 3Y. I'm dividing it out. And remember, we can always go back and check and make sure we have the right answer, because if we distribute it back, we should end up with what we started with. Try the next one. It says factor GCF. Looks like you can take a 7 out of everything. Looks like you can take an R out of everything. And this is what you'll be left with. You'll not say it's prime. If you say it's prime, it won't give you an option to type in the blank, right? It's not prime because we were able to factor it. Prime means you cannot factor it. This is not prime. We were able to factor it. Factor by grouping with 4 terms. What you want to do is group the first 2 and the last 2 and do GCF twice. For the first 2, I could take out a 5t squared and be left with t plus 4. For the second 2, if there's a minus sign, I'm going to go ahead and put that minus sign, okay? Whatever that sign is there. If it was a plus, I'll put a plus. Here it was a minus, I'm going to put a minus. I could take a 6 out of both of those. So really what I'm taking out is negative 6. If I take a negative 6 out of negative 6t, I'll be left with just a t. Negative 6 out of negative 24, I'll be left with a positive 4. Notice that these two parentheses match. I know I'm doing something correctly. And now I have to do GCF 3 times. That was 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I need to take a t plus 4 out of both, and I'll be left with 5t squared minus 6. Do the same thing on 38. Notice there's a minus sign in the middle. You know you'll have a minus sign. This is what my factoring looked like. For 39, we have 3 terms. Anytime you have 3 terms, you should do star method. A times C on top. That's 1 times negative 24 is negative 24. A on top left and top right, that's 1 and 1. B on the bottom, that's positive 5. And now I need to multiply to 24 and add to 5. Take a second, use your calculator, see if you can find those numbers. They should work as 8 and negative 3. Those both multiply to negative 24 and also add to positive 5. So then my answer is y plus 8, y minus 3. Try to use the variable you're given, right? That's going to keep me from having to go back and do a bunch of double checking with your scratch sheet of paper. If you put x's in here, I'm going to go back and give you a lot of partial credit. Just try and use the variables that you're given. So on this one, for example, you have w's. You should use w's in your answer. I went on and set up the star here for you. You're trying to multiply to 25 and add to 10. Some easy numbers here are 5 and 5. So then my answers are w plus 5 and w plus 5. If you put that answer in, that's just perfectly fine. You could also write it as w plus 5 squared, because there's 2 of those same thing. Again, if you wrote it like that, I'm going to give you the correct answer. Star method here, the difference here is we have our a's are not just 1, okay? And then the top is a times c. A times c. Can we multiply to negative 63 and add to positive 18? I think 21 and 3 are 63. So let's try 21 and negative 3, multiply to negative 63, and also add to positive 18. Can we simplify our fractions? So on the prior ones, 1 over something is not going to simplify. Here, 7 over 21 simplifies to 1 over 3. Our variable is z, so that's 1z plus 3. Z plus 3. The left-hand fraction will not simplify, so that's 7z minus 3. And that's my factored form. If you wanted to go back and check, you could FOIL that all out, and it should give you what you started with. This one just says factor. I will try GCF first. Doesn't look like there's a GCF. There's 2 terms. With 2 terms, we want to do difference of squares. We're going to leave everything in the same order that it is. So if I square root everything, that would be 8 minus 7u. I'm not going to move the u around. I'm not going to flip the 8 and the 7 and change their order. I'm leaving everything in the order that it came. Then my second factor is 8 plus 7u. That is factored. 43, same thing, difference of squares. Leave them in the order they are. So 10d minus 3c, and then 10d plus 3c. Question 44 says solve. Okay, with problems like this, The steps to solve a problem like this is get it equal to 0. The second half of the test, basically, get it equal to 0, factor it, and set the factors equal to 0. For this one, step 1, get it equal to 0, it's done. It's already equal to 0, right? Doesn't matter if the equal 0 is on the left or the right, as long as there's an equal 0 somewhere. Step 2, factor it, done. It's already factored. Step 3, set the factors equal to 0. So what would make this factor equal 0? Negative 9 plus 9 would make it equal 0. What would make this factor equal 0? Negative 6 plus 6 would equal 0, right? So then W would equal 6. The W is already built in there. So negative 9 and 6, that's our two answers. Same thing here. Step 1, get it equal to 0, check. Step 2, factor it, check. Step 3, set the factors equal to 0. So the left-hand factor, x equals 0. Boom. Second factor, 3x plus 8 equals 0. That's what I mean by set the factors equal to 0. 3x plus 8 equals 0, and then solve it. We get x equals negative 8 over 3. Check, we have our answers. I'm sorry I didn't cover this one up. Solve the equation. Step 1, set it equal to 0. Step 2, factor it. Step 3, set the factors equal to 0. So here and here are easy. D equals 3, D equals 4. Negative 3 and 4. This one's a little bit harder to think about, so we just go over to the side, set it equal to 0, and D equals negative 2 over 3. We got 3 solutions here. Question 47, solve for x. Step 1, get it equal to 0. Step 2, factor it. This one is not factored. It has 3 terms. So positive 12, negative 8. We're doing star method because it has 3 terms, and negative 6 and negative 2 are your multipliers here. Remember, at any point, if you want to pause that video, because I know I go a little fast here. The reason I'm going fast is because I only have a limited amount of internet broadband, and I'm hoping I can upload this video if it gets too long. So now it's factored. Step 3, set the factors equal to 0. X would equal 6 and 2. That's our answers. Question 48, identify the restricted values. Anytime a question asks you about restricted values, for this class, we're talking about values that make the denominator 0, the bottom of the fraction. This part right here. Anything that would make that 0, h cannot equal. And in this case, negative 9 plus 9 would make that 0, so h cannot equal negative 9. That is our restricted value. There is a restricted value, and it's negative 9. Find all excluded values. Same thing. What can v not equal? We can't make the bottom 0. 6 minus 2 times something would be 0. 6 minus 2 times 3 would be 0. So v cannot be 3. If v was 3, the whole bottom would be 0. Remember, if we can't just think about this in our heads, what we could do is come down here and say 6 minus 2v. What would make that equal 0? Subtract 6. Negative 2v equals negative 6. Divide by the negative 2. V equals 3. 3 would make the bottom 0. All right, multiply. If a problem says multiply and it has a bunch of fractions, pretty much from the halfway point on, you're going to try and factor first, okay? We're almost done. We're 5/6 of the way done. Question 50 of 59. I'm going to factor as many of these as I can. The top left, you just can't factor. The bottom right, you just can't factor. The top right, you can factor out a 3 GCF. The bottom left, you could do star method. I'll let you do the star method, and you should get x minus 2, x plus 1. Once you get it all factored out, you're going to get rid of all the things that match up. They have to match up perfectly. And then what's left on top is left on top. So 3, x plus 2. What's left on bottom is left on bottom. X minus 2, x minus 1. That is our answer. It did not simplify down a whole lot, did it? But that is our answer. On your test, if it asks you to add or subtract, you're going to have common denominators already, okay? So for us to add or subtract, all we have to do is keep the bottom the same, right? If I said 5/6 minus 1/6, that would be 4/6. We keep the bottom. We subtract across the top or add, whatever. All right, so for me, the bottom is going to stay the same. K squared minus 18k minus 81. And then if you have to add or subtract, you should also simplify. It says write it in simplified form. Make sure you read the question. This one, I can actually do star method on the top. Now that I have combined it, I can do star method on the top and get k minus 9 over k minus 9. What do you know? We have matching things on top and bottom. And so all that's left is this. On the next one, I went on and combined the top because the denominators were the same, right? The bottom's going to stay the same because it was already the same. Combine the top, factor the bottom. 3 terms, we can do star method. And we should get a plus 3, a plus 1. What do you know? We have things that match up. And there's nothing left on top. On this one, it was only left on top, k plus 9 over just a 1, right? So we can leave the denominator off. Here, there's nothing left on top. We have to leave it as a fraction. There's got to be something in the top of that fraction. And that is going to be our answer. All right, last few. If it asks us to solve, remember we want a number answer. We go back to if it's an equation, right? If it's an equation, we can start multiplying, getting rid of fractions. If it's an equation, we don't want to solve an equation with fractions. So what we're going to do is multiply by all the distinct denominators. And on any of them that they match up, we can get rid of them. That's the point. Don't leave it there. If it matches up, get rid of it. Now I need to multiply that 2 by both of those. 2v minus 8 plus that 4 equals that 6. All right, now we have a regular equation that we can solve. 2v, those two combine to make negative 4. Add the 4. 2v equals 10. Divide by the 2. V equals 5. With any rational equation, with any equation that starts with fractions, you need to make sure that you don't make the bottom 0 at the end. 5 minus 4 makes 1. It does not make the bottom 0. So that is our answer. If it makes the bottom 0, you have to toss it out and you would have no solution. I could have said from the very beginning that V cannot equal positive 4, right? That is our restricted value that we saw back a few questions ago. V cannot equal 4. So if I had gotten V equals 4, I would have had to toss it. Try this one, knowing that in the end, V cannot or W cannot equal negative 2. All right, I'll multiply by W plus 2 everywhere. On this middle term, the negative 4 has to go to both of those, right? That's a negative 4 going to both of those. So negative 4W minus 8. Combine like terms. Subtract the W. Add the 4. And we get negative 4 equals W. That doesn't match our restriction, so that's a perfectly fine answer. On the next one, simplify a square root. To simplify a square root, we break it down with a factor tree. 112 is divisible by 4. It's 4 and 28. I just checked that in the calculator. It doesn't matter how you break it down, as long as you break it down into the smallest components possible. You're only circling things once they get to the bottom. I didn't circle the 4 because it broke down further. I didn't circle the 28 because it broke down further. Once you get it broken down, you're going to write it down in numerical order. Take this extra step. Don't try and skip this step, okay? And then look for buddies. And remember that buddies get to hold hands and go outside. So we still have our little house here, right? The 7 does not have a buddy. 7 has to go inside. Outside, these get to go outside. 2 times 2 makes 4. If I had more than one thing left inside, I would multiply it. Any more than one thing outside, you also multiply it. Same thing on the next one. Square root of 96, try it. Here's what I did. I broke it down, and I got 2, 2, 2, 2, and 3. Multiply these to get 4. Multiply these to get 6. Buddies go outside. Remember, buddies go outside. These guys had buddies. They got to go outside. These guys did not have buddies. They had to go inside. All right, if it asks you to add or subtract, you're going to be able to get them to have like terms. For now, we can't combine them. They don't have like terms, okay? So what we need to do first is go and break them down as far as we can. So the 27, here, let's color code this. The 27 is 9 and 3. That's 3 and 3. Those are our babies. The 48, let's get a different color here, is 6 and 8. That's 3 and 2. 8 is 4 and 2. That's 2 and 2. So that let's get our problem a little organized here. We have negative 2 times something minus something, right? Negative 2 times the blue thing minus what I think is a purple thing. All right, for the blue, I have 3, 3, and 3. Those are buddies. That 1, 3 has to go inside. For the purple, I have 2, 2, 2, 2, and 3. Those are buddies, those are buddies, makes 4. Inside is 3. And now I can start to combine things. Negative 2 times that would be negative 6 root 3 minus 4 root 3. They have like terms now. I can combine the negative 6 and negative 4 and make it negative 10 root 3. Question 58 and 59 are both going to ask you to rationalize the denominator. Rationalize the denominator. Remember, we don't want to leave a square root in the bottom of a fraction. The top doesn't matter. We care about the bottom. So multiply by square root 7 on top and bottom. You won't have one where there's more than one thing in the bottom, okay? You'll only have one item in the bottom for this test. You're going to multiply by that item. On the top, you have square root 21. On the bottom, you have square root 49. And the bottom will always simplify for these. Remember, you don't want a square root on the bottom. So for me, I'm going to leave the square root 21 alone. But on the bottom, the square root 49, I can type that in the calculator and get just a 7. Try the same thing here. I would multiply by square root 18, top and bottom. And get 9 square root 18 over 18. The difference in this one, I can go one more step. It says write it in exact simplified form, right? Simplified form. So here, if I only look, I'm going to highlight something for you. If I only look at this part, the part that's not in the square root, ignore the square root, the 9 over 18 itself. 9 over 18, if you type that in your calculator, you'll get 1 over 2. 9 divided by 18 simplifies to 1 over 2. And so to simplify this, I need to simplify everything but the square root. 9 over 18 simplifies to 1 over 2. That's every question worked. I hope you guys watched this. I hope you paused along the way. You can rewatch this as many times as you need to. Make sure you can do every problem here. If you can do every problem on this review, then you can get 100 on the exam.